As the lion regained its footing, David charged forward with his staff, shouting, "The Lord is my strength and my shield." He struck the lion with all his might, delivering a final blow that left the beast motionless. David stood over the lion's lifeless body, his chest heaving from the exertion. It was the break of dawn. The faint, golden rays of the morning sun kissed the hills of Bethlehem as David quietly left his father's house. His older brothers still lay asleep, weary from their labor in the fields the day before. But David, the youngest, had a different responsibility, one that filled his heart with both purpose and peace. With a shepherd's staff in one hand and a sling tucked into his belt, David called softly to the flock of sheep that waited just outside the house. They bleated in response, ready to follow their devoted shepherd. Jesse, his father, stood silently at the window, watching his youngest son disappear over the hills. A mix of pride and concern filled his heart. "Lord, keep him safe," Jesse whispered, his gaze lingering as David's silhouette blended into the early morning haze. The flock grazed peacefully as David led them to a familiar hillside. The air was cool, filled with the sound of chirping birds and the rustling of grass. David's voice joined the melody of nature as he sang a psalm, his harp resting beside him. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters." But as the day wore on, the peaceful rhythm of the wilderness began to shift. The birds' songs faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. David's sharp eyes scanned the horizon, and his hand instinctively reached for the sling at his side. Then he heard it, a low growl. From behind a cluster of rocks, a massive lion emerged. Its golden mane shimmered in the fading sunlight, but its eyes burned with hunger as it locked onto a lamb that had wandered too far from the flock. The sheep scattered, their frightened cries filling the air. David's heart raced, but he stood firm, gripping his staff tightly. "The same God who delivered me before will deliver me now," he muttered under his breath. The lion lunged. With a precision born of countless hours of practice, David swung his sling, sending a stone hurtling toward the beast. The stone struck the lion squarely on the forehead, and it stumbled, dazed but not defeated. As the lion regained its footing, David charged forward with his staff, shouting, "The Lord is my strength and my shield." He struck the lion with all his might, delivering a final blow that left the beast motionless. David stood over the lion's lifeless body, his chest heaving from the exertion. The flock of sheep slowly crept closer, their wide eyes fixed on their shepherd. One lamb nuzzled against his leg, a silent gesture of trust and gratitude. David knelt beside the lion, his hands trembling, not from fear but from the overwhelming realization of what had just happened. He lifted his eyes to the heavens and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for your deliverance." The sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the hills. David's shadow stretched long and tall over the defeated predator, a symbol of God's power working through him. As night fell, David led his flock back toward Bethlehem. The stars lit the path before him, and his voice carried a psalm through the cool night air. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." When he returned, Jesse greeted him at the door, his eyes widening as he saw the dirt-streaked tunic and the faint trace of blood on David's staff. "What happened, my son?" Jesse asked. David smiled, his expression humble yet confident. "The Lord delivered us from the paw of the lion today." David's battles in the wilderness were not just about protecting sheep, they were about preparing him for something greater. With every lion and bear he faced, his faith grew stronger, his courage deeper, and his trust in God unshakable. Little did David know, the same hand that helped him slay the lion would soon help him defeat a giant and lead a nation. This is the story of a shepherd who trusted God completely, even in the face of overwhelming danger. If you've ever felt overlooked or unprepared for the challenges ahead, remember David's example. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. What lions are you facing today? Trust in the Lord, for His power is made perfect in your weakness. Subscribe for more inspiring stories of faith, courage, and God's unfailing love. Let David's journey remind you that no challenge is too great when God is with you. David stood in the pasture, his sling loosely hanging from his side as he guided the sheep back toward the fold. His hands, calloused from labor, worked skillfully, and his eyes glimmered with peace. Outwardly, he was just a shepherd, unassuming, overlooked, but within him burned a heart of worship and courage that even he didn't fully understand. That same day, the prophet Samuel arrived in Bethlehem under the Lord's instruction. The air was charged with purpose, though the villagers didn't yet know why. Samuel carried the horn of oil, its weight symbolic of the great task before him. God had sent him to anoint a new king for Israel, one who would rise above the failures of Saul. Samuel entered Jesse's home, and the family gathered. The brothers stood tall, their confidence radiating as they were called forward one by one. Eliab, the eldest, was the first. His stature was imposing, his appearance regal. Samuel's heart stirred, and he thought, "Surely this must be the Lord's anointed." But the voice of God was clear and firm. "Do not look at his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." One by one, Jesse presented his sons, Abinadab, Shammah, and the others, each strong, accomplished, and seemingly fit for kingship. Yet the quiet whisper of God repeated the same refrain. Not this one. Confusion flickered in Samuel's eyes. Turning to Jesse, he asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" Jesse hesitated, almost dismissively. "There remains the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep." Samuel straightened. "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." The brothers exchanged glances, their skepticism clear. David, the shepherd? Surely this was a mistake. Moments later, David appeared, the scent of the fields clinging to him, his youthful face flushed from the walk. His brothers towered over him, and yet as Samuel looked at him, the Lord's presence filled the room. "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Samuel's heart swelled as he uncorked the horn of oil. David knelt, eyes wide with humility and wonder. As the oil flowed over his head, a warmth unlike anything he had ever known enveloped him. It wasn't the oil itself, but the Spirit of the Lord, descending upon him in power, marking him for a destiny far greater than tending sheep. The room fell silent. The brothers who moments ago had dismissed David now stared in awe. Samuel's voice broke the stillness, his words both a blessing and a prophecy. "The Lord has chosen you, David, not for what man sees, but for what he has seen in your heart." As David rose, the faintest smile touched his lips. He didn't yet grasp the full weight of what had just happened, but he knew this much. God had seen him when no one else did. That night, under a canopy of stars, David stood alone in the field. The sheep slept peacefully nearby, but his thoughts were restless. He gazed at the heavens, his heart full of questions and quiet anticipation. The same God who guided him to protect his flock from lions and bears had now called him to something greater. God had not chosen the strongest or the tallest. He had chosen the one whose heart beat in rhythm with his own. And so, the shepherd boy, overlooked by men, began the journey toward becoming Israel's greatest king. David's story reminds us that God doesn't choose based on outward appearance or societal expectations, but looks at the heart. His journey from a humble shepherd to the anointed king of Israel inspires us to trust in God's plan, even when others overlook us. What's in your heart? Like David, you are called to something greater than you can imagine. Will you trust God's timing and step into your destiny?
A simple task, but in God we trust. Every step we take, though we cannot see, leads us closer to our destiny. It's the step